Hello everyone, this is Umair Qureshi and Tammy with you once again on Ed Talk Live with UQ and Tammy. And it had been a while that we missed the days and we couldn't come up with the show, but today we are again back with a wonderful educator, with a wonderful expert of inquiry-based learning. And Tammy, tell us about yourself and the guest.
Sure will. Hi, Umair and Kath. It's been a few weeks since we had a show, but we have today, I'm really excited to have Kath Murdoch. And the next few weeks we have shows lined up as well. So I'm Tammy Muziowski, president of the Emerging Leader Alumni Affiliate, which is one of the affiliates of ASCD. And Umair and I have been doing Ed Talk Live for a few weeks. I think we started in February, our first show. So we've had some good responses from our past guests, and we're excited to continue talking with educators from around the world and bridging that global community that we have as educators. So I want to introduce Kath Murdoch. Kath is a consultant in inquiry learning. She is was a former primary teacher, a university lecturer, and is now a full-time consultant. She works in the field of inquiry learning and has been doing that for over 30 years. And she lives in Melbourne, Australia, and I had to do a quick change in our promo because I had my time zones mixed up, but it worked out okay. And so she lives in Melbourne, but works in schools all over the world. And she's got a few books published on inquiry-based learning. The latest is The Power of Inquiry, and has just recently published a set of cards called The Art of Inquiry, which those cards actually led me to communicating with you on Twitter. So thanks for that response. And welcome, Kath.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to ask you first question. We're going to get right into it. How did you begin your journey into the world of inquiry?
Well, in many ways, I've almost never taught any other way. I did my teacher training in the early 80s, and I was lucky enough to learn with some really progressive educators at the time. And the basic core of inquiry-based learning was part of my training as a young teacher. Of course, what I did then is very different to the way that I use the approach now. But I think my journey began at the same time as my journey of learning to be a teacher began. So, Australia and New Zealand, many parts of both countries have been working this way for a really long time. So it's kind of in the blood.
That's awesome. I'm just going to flip some questions, if you don't mind, Umair. I'm going to steal one of yours. You said that at the beginning of your career, looks obviously different than it does now. So what kind of shifts have you seen in the world of inquiry?
Oh, it's been a huge, we've learned so much in the last 30 years, like any profession. Our practice changes as a result of the research. Let me think. Probably some of the main changes. So something really simple but very powerful has been a shift from where we once would have had kids kind of inquiring into what we might call topics. I remember when I first started out, I'd do units on trees and a unit on the sea and a unit on fairy tales. And it was kind of inquiry, but it's very shallow, surface level, more what we would call thematic. And I think one of the real shifts now is that we now understand that when we're engaging children in inquiry, it needs to be into powerful conceptual questions that lead to those deep, transferable conceptual understandings, and also that the contexts that work best are much less about topics and much more about real-world problems and issues. So that's certainly one of the big shifts. And probably another one that goes with it is a huge change in the way that we plan or design for learning. I used to feel way back then. Very proud of myself when I'd plan a whole unit of inquiry from beginning to end, have all the weeks organised. And again, it was a very tightly controlled version of inquiry. Now I wouldn't dream of doing that. I know much more about how to use the data that the learners provide through those early conversations, and use that to guide the next bit, to do it collaboratively with students, with other educators, and to see the whole process as one that is emergent rather than prescribed from the outset. They're just two of the important changes that we've seen.
Yeah, I think that one of the key things is that emergent planning is huge. So what are some of the, and I know there's a lot that you could name here, but what are some of the benefits of both inquiry, teaching, and learning that you've seen?
Yes, this is a little bit like choosing my favourite child or something. Which benefit do I share? Okay, so
convince us why we should do that.
Well, certainly one of the benefits that comes to mind is that, inquiry is driven by, when it's done well, and I'm going to say that the benefits I'm about to share with you are, the premise behind it is that inquiry as an approach is being used by skilled and informed teachers. So the quality of the learning is, of course, directly related, as it is all the time, to the quality of the teacher's knowledge, their understanding of the approach. But when it's done in a really informed way, then one of the benefits is the power of the curiosity. So curiosity drives it, right? So a great inquiry teacher knows how to really provoke that curiosity. When we learn because we are curious, when we learn in order to satisfy a question, a hunger to find out, basically we learn better, the learning is deeper, and the learning lasts longer. So if curiosity drives it well, the benefit is actually much more sustained and deep learning. And I guess the second real benefit that comes to mind is it's around agency. Again, this requires great knowledge and skill, I think, on teachers' behalves. But when they do this well, they really know how to share the power with their students. The students help drive the process, and because of that, they develop this learner identity, or should I say they hang on to the learner identity they were born with, that is one that sees themselves as capable, competent learners whose actions make a difference. And when we have that sense, if we see ourselves as capable and competent learners, hugely beneficial. And on a lighter note, it's way more interesting to teach this way. It's way more engaging. You don't look back.
Right.
I agree with you.
So, Kath, I would like to add one thing before we move on to the next question. At the moment, we have a wonderful audience with us. We have people from China, from Zambia, from Kuwait, and they are greeting. Everyone is greeting, actually. We have people from South Korea, what I can see on the panel, and so a lot of people are here with us today on the show. But before I move on, someone asked and commented, actually, they say that the guy says that, are there transcripts or notes for this talk available later? Yeah, the show will be uploaded on the YouTube channel, and you can watch it later as well. Yeah. So, Kath, I have another question, and my question is, fine, there are benefits of this teaching and learning through inquiry, but on the flip side, what are the challenges that you see with this approach in relation to both teachers and students?
Well, there are many that they're outweighed by the benefits, but there certainly are challenges. I'd be lying if I said there weren't. Perhaps, okay, a couple for teachers. The first links to what I said before about the importance of us recognising this isn't just something that you pick up and do quickly. I think this is something that for many teachers requires an investment initially of time and good quality professional learning. The challenge is to understand it well. I think when it's done in a very shallow, flippant way, it can become kind of what I've once read described as sham inquiry. You know, it looks like it sounds like it, but it isn't it. So the challenge is to understand it deeply. And another challenge that everyone talks about, and it's true, is the challenge that many of us feel, and I still have it too, of releasing responsibility, of managing our own nervousness about relinquishing control. It's so wrapped up with our identity as teachers that for many of us it's like just turning an ocean liner around, you know, to flip that idea that I'm the all-powerful, all-knowing controller to I'm actually more of a coach. I'm leading from behind. It's quite a different role. So that those two things can be quite challenging. But for the learner, well, it really depends. You know, I can walk into a classroom of 4-year-olds and there's nothing challenging about inquiring for them. That is how they are. Perhaps where we see the challenge sometimes for our learners are when they've been schooled, when they have learned ways of being at school that are about teacher pleasing, being passive, being thinking they always need to be right, not being willing to change their mind or their perspective about something. So when they've been used to a particular way of being, then suddenly being expected to think for themselves, to share their thinking, to theorise, to take risks, all those beautiful things associated with inquiry, that can be really challenging if school hasn't been a place where that's been common practice. We can turn that around, we know we can, but the challenge is often having to unlearn, for teachers and for learners, unlearn ways of being and relearn new ways of being.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Tammy, your turn.
So just with that in mind, students kind of having to unlearn some ways, do you find that, I know that you are a primary teacher, but you're also a lecturer. Do you then in your travels work with teachers at the upper level, and do you see less work than at that higher level as students get older? Is there less inquiry-based learning?
Oh, yeah. I do. My work is almost all with early childhood through to about year 6. I do some work with middle years and a little sometimes with that right up, you know, the final years of schooling. But all my experience, all my research, all my writing is pretty much in that whole elementary sphere. So I'm answering this tentatively.
Sure.
When I do work in like a K to 12 environment, it tends to be that we are more likely to see this approach being used in the elementary school. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Having said that, I'm also really aware of and seeing and hearing lots of amazing work being done in many post-primary schools, particularly around personalised inquiry and kids being given opportunities to follow their passions and programs being set up. I just, in fact, saw some beautiful stuff being done at the Western Academy of Beijing WAB with the senior students being given a whole day to inquire. Really exciting. So while perhaps there's less of it happening in secondary schools, I think that there's a real shift happening at the moment, and we're going to see it happening more and more. Yeah,
That's
so I'm thinking positively about that.
Yeah.
That's right. That's great. So, Kath, I have one question. We discussed this thing, and you answered it very well. Like the powerful inquiry-based teaching, apply a lot of authentic pedagogy and assessment, and authentic intellectual work, and interactive instruction. In reality, in many systems, like when I relate it with my local system in Pakistan and even in most part of the world, in reality, when most of the systems which actually try to approach the inquiry-based teaching and learning, they do not work at their full potential because eventually, when the projects are given to the students and the students are involved in the projects, they become more fragile as they become a tool of syllabus coverage than exploring something. So, what do you suggest? How to address this issue?
I mean, it's we have it to a degree here too, where there's a kind of a mismatch between system level expectations and requirements. In fact, we've just come off the back of a national testing week here in Australia, where suddenly these beautiful classrooms that I work in that have been all set up in collaborative, flexible spaces with great learning stories on the wall, and suddenly they're turned into, for the week, these barren, sterile environments with rows so that the children can sit and do their tests. Look, over time, I've tended to become more pragmatic, really, about that. I think I work in schools where they really do manage to keep that some of the system level requirements that don't fit well with this philosophy, that they still do them, they attend to them, they prepare the children as appropriate for them, but they keep them in their place. And growing up around those in the school, particularly with assessment, so many other really powerful practices that align much more strongly with the principles that sit behind inquiry learning. So, and these schools even might say, look, we get some data from the system level requirements that can be useful, but we don't allow it to overtake and get in the way of the work that we really value. And if the system level requirements don't demonstrate what we value, for example, some of the skills and processes that our students are demonstrating, then we will find ways to share with parents and students to report on those in-house, so that, because we all know that what is assessed and reported on is often what is seen as valued. So if we don't balance that out at a school level, if the system level stuff's not doing it, then we need to do it. So it can be problematic, but I also see people managing that really beautifully and making sure they keep their eye on what they value.
Right. So then, what would you advise to teachers who want to become more proficient at teaching through an inquiry approach at any level, if they are afraid of making shift in practice? The biggest fears are actually coming out of the existing zone and getting an experience, something new. So, what do you suggest if you have to write bullets that do this and this and this and this, and here you go, you will be going for it.
Boom, done.
Yeah.
I'll just find my recipe. Hang on, where is it? Well, firstly, obviously, there's no one way. There's no one path. People come to this all sorts of ways, and I love that. I love the diversity. my instinct is to say find some like-minded buddies to do it with. You know, there's always a group of teachers in a school that are really wanting to give this a go, even if they're very early, and there's nothing more helpful and motivating than being able to have some conversations, even with one other person. They don't have to be at your grade level, but find some people to start the journey with. I also want to say, kind of jump in, give something a go, and maybe that thing is starting with the fundamentals, like start to invite your learners to share their questions with you before you share your questions with them. Tune into your kids, talk to them. What do they think is important to learn about? How would they design for their learning? Actually spend some time, if you've never done it before, spend some time really talking to your kids about their learning and what they want for their learning. Sometimes that's all we need, is just to open up that conversation, and we start to see the power of that kind of collaboration. There's loads of strategies and ways of working. The Ron Richards' beautiful thinking routines are such a lovely toolkit for helping teachers see what's going on in kids' heads, and therefore making that visible, and then being able to use that to inform where to go next. So they're a really lovely starting place too. And read. There's some amazing blogs. There are fabulous books. In fact, I put on Twitter today just a quick photo of books that have come out about inquiry-based learning just in the last 2 years. There's been quite a plethora of really great resources. There's no excuse, really. There's so much out there. But you know, a colleague of mine once said to me, "You know what, Kath? I think with this stuff, it's less a matter of ready, aim, fire. Don't think you've got to wait until you understand it all completely. Build your understanding. You know, to a degree. What's that adage? I was going to say." He also then went on to say, it's fire, aim, ready. You know, jump in, and then as you're jumping in, inform yourself. Build the plane while it's flying, to a degree. Yeah, but definitely find like-minded people. If they're not in your school, create a professional learning network. Get on Twitter. Connect with other inquiry teachers around the world. There's an amazing global community of extraordinary teachers that's your best way in.
That's great. I found one interesting question from audience. I would like to show you that question, and that is relevant. There's a lot of relevance of this question. The question is,
okay.
If you see on your screens,
I have to put my glasses on.
Parents. It's okay.
I've lost my glasses. Oh no, I can see it. Hang on. Okay. Let's go back here. Role of parents. How can parents be aware of the approach? Supporting.
How can parents be aware of the approach, support, inquiry, learning, and understand? And I would like to add one thing. You know, this is the big major issue in the developing countries, especially where the people heavily rely on the standardized examination and assessment systems. So when a school is going to take some initiative, we normally have seen this thing that the schools complain that how we do that with the parents. You know, the parents want tests, parents want marks, parents have to judge their kids. There's so many things going on. So how to convince the parents that this is a good approach?
Yeah, it can be. I agree. It can be. And it's really important that, I mean, parents, teachers and children should be collaborating and working together to grow that child. I always think that once you start really getting into a conversation with parents and we allow them to have some agency in all of this, we find that we have more in common than we do differences about this, that we all want most of the parents I speak with, in the end, they want their children to be strong, capable, competent learners that are ready both for their learning now and in the future. And that if we can find some of that common ground, that helps. I think it's much less about trying to convince and much more about having conversations, inviting parents into learning spaces to have first-hand experiences of this way of learning and working. I have to recommend a really fabulous post that the amazing team at the International School of Ho Chi Minh City posted recently, where they very generously shared the process that they use to have these kinds of conversations with parents in Vietnam. And if people are interested in more progressive and different ways, not just herding parents into a hall and showing them PowerPoint slides, but actually having real conversations, that's a great one. So hop on and have a look at that. And I guess the last thing, one of the things that I often do is actually invite parents to come in, and we teach the parents and work with the parents the way that we would work with their children, and it's fabulous. And then we have big conversations afterwards about how the learning has happened and what skills, what curriculum standards, what we've actually attended to, and how much richer it is when we do it this way. So we don't ignore the curriculum standards, we actually show how we get to them.
Right.
I'm probably taking too long to answer that question, so I'll stop there.
Okay. It's an important one.
So have you seen any shifts in 30 years in inquiry-based teaching?
Yep, apart from the ones that I mentioned earlier about, from topics to concepts, from prescriptive to emergent. You know what? One of the big shifts when we first started with this work, we didn't do a lot of explicit work around building what I call learning assets, really growing explicitly kids' sense of themselves as thinkers, as researchers, as communicators, as collaborators, as self-managers. In the PYP, many of the people joining in now will be familiar with the PYP. They're called the approaches to learning across the IB. There's lots of other frameworks that are very similar, but I think the kind of parallel work on growing those 21st century skills and dispositions has really, it's altered what's driving what we do. I used to be very driven just by growing understanding, those conceptual understandings, and now I am equally driven by the development of those transferable skills and dispositions. That's been such an important shift, and it's just added this layer of sophistication to the work that's really powerful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Can I pick one more question from the comments?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So here is another question. Is there
I found my glasses this time. Look, there we are. A rubric. There's lots. Different people have produced different. We've all sort of attempted to try and create something that says, look, this is what, if you're working like this at a high level, it looks like this. They're always a little bit problematic doing those things because it's so dependent on your context and your children. But yeah, lots of people have published either checklists or rubrics or continua about inquiry teaching practices.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so the thing that brought us together was your new set of inquiry cards. Can you talk a bit about why you decided to create cards? Because you've got a number of books. So this is a new venture.
Yeah. Look, so the 10 practices that the cards illustrate and explain, I've actually been working on those practices for about 3 years now, refining them, all the time thinking this is going to be the next book. And the closer I got to, okay, I've got the book, the more I thought I wanted to do something different. The Power of Inquiry, the book prior to this, it's really big. It's 10 books in one, and there's a lot of detail in it. And I almost felt like I wanted something that was more personal, accessible, and I got a friend to illustrate the practices when I was using them in workshops. And every time I put the illustrations up around the room, people would say, "Oh, they're so beautiful. Where do we get them?" And I thought, okay, what can I do with this? So Justine and I worked together to make the cards, and I'm still waiting to see, how they'll work. But I use them. I use them just to give myself little reminders as I teach, because I do a lot of classroom-based teaching as part of my professional learning. And they're really, I wanted them to be a kind of personal reminder for a teacher to say, oh, that's right. Okay, I'm really going to try and do a better job of noticing today, or I'm really going to try and cultivate curiosity. And this is my little reminder. I'm just going to have that card right there with a few ideas, or people use them for walkthroughs and things like that. But yeah, I wanted to create something that was a different kind of resource.
Awesome. I'm excited to get mine. I'll be in Australia in July, so I'm going to get them.
Oh, okay. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Yeah.
You should get one pack for me.
Yes, for sure. I definitely will.
Yeah.
So I know that we're ending our half an hour together, but do you think we could maybe take one more question, Umair, if there's one that's popped up?
Yeah. So there is one question that is related to native and non-native speakers. Let me show you that question on the screen. So here's the question. Having conversation with the kids is amazing with native speaker students. Do you think it would work with non-native speaker students with lack of vocabulary?
Yes, because they don't lack a vocabulary. They may lack a vocabulary in English, but they have vocabulary. And in fact, we're not just talking about language as in the spoken language. I'm going to borrow the beautiful phrase from the Reggio Emilia philosophy, that is the 100 languages of the child. And I think what inquiry teachers do really well is that they recognise the importance of giving children multiple opportunities to express themselves in multiple ways. It's also really important that we embrace 100 languages too, in the same way that we're not always expecting conversation and spoken dialogue to be the vehicle through which we assess or build understanding. So we use a wide range of communication tools, and I think we're finding more and more now that this is where our digital technologies are so powerful that children are amazingly adept at using, for all its flaws, things like Google Translate, finding ways. This is another great way to work with parents too, to involve parents in the inquiry and really building the language, whatever language is the language that is going to help that child explore those concepts in the most powerful way. And I see this happening a great deal, particularly in international schools. So, yeah, I don't think it's a barrier. I think it can actually be an asset. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so before we move on, people are interested. Today we are flooded with questions. So here's another question. Is there any link to purchase cards?
Oh, just through my website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll attach it to the Yeah, and we'll put it with the YouTube link as well.
Oh,
We
yeah.
can stick it in the comments. Yeah.
That's kind of you.
Tammy, you have any question?
Well, usually I know it's late in Melbourne, so I want to honor Kath's time. But if you don't mind, just maybe just leaving us with one of your favorite quotes or a couple of words of wisdom for teachers to wrap up.
There's so many again. But you know what? The one that it is hard, but I'm just going to go with my heart. And the one quote that I often find myself saying or reminding people of in workshops, it's very famous and is acknowledged to be from Maria Montessori, and translated is something like, "Please don't do it for me. Help me learn to do it for myself." And it's a mantra for me as a parent, or has been. My kids are older now, but no, it still applies. But also a mantra for me as a teacher. You know, what am I doing that these children could and should be doing for themselves? Am I actually removing their opportunity to shine and to strengthen that agency that they were born with and that they deserve to have nurtured at school? So it's please don't do it for me, but help me learn how to do it for myself. It's
very powerful.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, gave me a little bit of chills too.
So
Thank you.
Tammy, you finished?
I was just gonna thank Kath for her time on this Sunday evening. We really appreciate it. I know that we've got a lot of comments to go through, so we'll answer and as best we can. And the link to the YouTube recording will be up in the next half an hour or so for people to view.
So while heading to the end of this program, I would like to thank you, Kath, and thank you, Tammy.
It's my pleasure.
Being on the program. And before we end, I would like to add one thing and tell the people who have joined us today that this program is actually meant to bring good voices and actually not perfect, but wonderful voices from the world of education. So this program is actually a collaborative project of EL ASCD and Pakistan ASCD, and the program will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. Do support us, be with us, and join us next time with another wonderful educationist. And thank you, Kath. Once again, it was fabulous.
That's my pleasure.
I'm overwhelmed with this idea, and it's wonderful. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.